Hello and welcome to Kentucky.
Every moment tonight, they led me to you. Every single time you look at me, I lose.
Hi, welcome to Unpacked with Mac. My name's Mackenzie and I love to travel. I'm not actually in Kentucky right now. I know, I lied to you. I was in Kentucky a couple weeks ago, but all of the clips are kind of jumbled everywhere because we did some pretty intense and insane activities. We ziplined underground. That being said, I think I'm going to narrate this episode a little bit more. Starting off our few days in Kentucky, we drove from Cincinnati, Ohio to Frankfort, which is actually the capital of the state. Now, I almost collect going to different capitals, if that makes any sense, because I love visiting the state capitol complexes and buildings in all different states that I visit. I think it's a great way to not only meet some of the people that live there, but learn a little bit of the history of the state that you're in. Now, unfortunately, the Kentucky state capitol was under construction during the time that we were there, or at least the dome part was, so we weren't able to see kind of the full dome, but here's a picture of what the dome originally looked like. Now again, it's under renovation, so it could look completely different by the time you go there. Now the most interesting part of the dome was actually part of the renovation that we got to see inside the state capitol, and that included an added lighting feature that changes color and basically lights up the entire rotunda. So you enter the state capitol and it's like a mini, I don't want to say a rave party because that feels not right to say for a state capitol, but a little bit of a mini rave party inside the capitol. Now, walking around the capitol, we saw so many different people and they were all super, super nice to us. Whether it be the lady at the front reception desk, there was a gardener working on this huge kind of clock sculpture, which let me take a second to talk about this beautiful, I don't know, I can't remember if it was a calendar or a clock, but obviously you'll see with the video here, but it was this giant wishing well and there's a gardener working on it, and just the amount of effort it has to take to keep this in perfect pristine condition is so impressive. One thing to note about Kentucky that I didn't quite realize until we went inside the capitol is the Kentucky accent. Now Kentucky is pretty far north, so I didn't consider it to be a southern state like some other states that I visited, but their accent is so southern, it's not even funny. I remember we met this girl at the reception desk who was like, "Give me a holler if y'all need anything," and I found it so funny because I did not think it was a southern state, because it doesn't seem like a southern state to me, but it totally was. Speaking of Kentucky being a southern state, we actually stopped by KFC on our way to Louisville, which is where we spent the majority of our time in Kentucky. I don't know why I felt the need to go to KFC in Kentucky. I thought it was part of the experience. I thought it was something I needed to do. Kentucky Fried Chicken in Kentucky. It was originally started in Louisville, so I thought it fit. Turns out it doesn't taste any better than it does in Colorado, where I'm from, and I don't know if I would recommend anyone to ever get Kentucky Fried Chicken. It was pretty gross. The biscuits were pretty hard. Anyway, I successfully had Kentucky Fried Chicken in Kentucky, and I think I just have to accept that if I hadn't done it, I would still be on my checklist of things that I should have done, but I also don't think it was necessary. But luckily for me, we couldn't stay at KFC for too long because we did have plans that night to see a race at Churchill Downs. Now I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background about Churchill Downs, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about our failure with Churchill Downs. I should preface this by saying I am not an avid horse racer. I don't keep up to date on horse racing events. I thought it was just a fun thing to do. I think whenever you are in a state, please go experience whatever it has to offer. Like, we went to the NASCAR Museum in Charlotte, North Carolina, despite me never having ever, I don't even think, Google searched something about NASCAR. That being said, maybe I should have done a little more research on the Kentucky Derby and the current state of Churchill Downs before we went to Louisville, because we booked tickets for an evening race. They typically do twilight races on Thursday evenings. The only issue is that they're not currently racing at the track. So we went all the way there and it was after the time that the museum was closed, it was after the time that tours were closed, everything was shut down for the day. because it was later, because we thought it was going to be an evening race day, and it turns out they're actually racing at a racetrack about 30 minutes away for the rest of the season. If you're wondering why they're not racing at Churchill Downs, it actually has to do with an investigation on the track right now. There's a lot of horses that were getting injured and even having fatal injuries, resulting in the death of, I think it was like 12 horses over the course of a month. If that isn't correct, this is the correct thing. That being said, I'm really glad that they're taking the opportunity to kind of make sure that the track is safe for the horses, and I'm really proud of them for making that decision. But I definitely wish I did the research before making us drive all the way to Churchill Downs. Now, that doesn't mean that you guys don't get more context about the Kentucky Derby, because I did go back the next day, which wasn't part of the plan, but when in Louisville, I feel like I had to go experience the full Churchill Downs, and obviously just walking around the night before wasn't going to cut it. So we went back the next day to kind of see a little bit of a tour. I use the term tour very loosely. It was like you walk onto the track and you see it, and walk around the museum a little bit more. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context and the story of the Kentucky Derby. Known as the most exciting 2 minutes in sports history, the Kentucky Derby has been going on the first Saturday of May for the past 149 years. Yes, that means if you plan ahead, you could be there for the 150th anniversary this next May. The history of the Kentucky Derby is actually pretty funny to me, because it was pretty much just this really rich guy who was part of the jockey club named Meriwether, and he was actually a descendant of like Lewis and Clark, like the explorers that went out west and made their little trail. Yeah, clearly I didn't pay enough attention in history class. I'm working on it, guys. One day I'm gonna walk the Lewis and Clark trail. Maybe not the whole thing, maybe like an hour segment of it, but one point I'm gonna do it. Anyway, this guy had a ton of land and decided that he was going to do a horse race in Louisville, where he was from, and the crowds just got bigger and bigger every year, and slowly it grew into the massive thing that you see today. Side note, but Kentucky really has a thing for construction, because Churchill Downs was also under construction while we were there, which I think has to do with just the timing of, like, since the track was closed down for racing, why not take that as a time to renovate your space, which makes a lot of sense. But I wanted to give you guys the history of the Twin Spires, which is like one of the most famous pieces here. I have to like insert a picture from the internet because I couldn't get a good view of them. Anyway, the Twin Spires were designed by this architect and are honestly the most iconic piece of Churchill Downs Racing Stadium. But the funniest piece to me that actually our tour guide told us was that the architect who designed the Twin Spires, he was invited to the Kentucky Derby every single year after that, but he refused to sit under them because he didn't think they were stable enough. So, you know, sit below the spires at your own risk if you decide to go to the 150th anniversary. Now, before I tell you about the most famous horse in racing history, known as the best horse of all time, I'm going to tell you the two key things that I think you should try if you go to the Kentucky Derby for the 150th anniversary. First off, get yourself a fastener. A fastener is those fancy hats that they're known for wearing. Here's a picture of me wearing a fastener. Please, when else in your life are you going to be able to wear one of those and not look out of place and stupid? Do it. And number two, get yourself a mint julep. Now, I'm under 21, so I can't personally tell you if it's good or not, but you should get one. And if you want even more, they sell little collectible mint julep glasses in the gift shop that I think you should also get. Again, under 21, so I can't tell you if it's good, but like, it sounds great. Now that I've hopefully convinced you that you need to go to the Kentucky Derby for one, and two, do the two things that I personally want you to do at the Kentucky Derby, and please send me pictures or something, because I really want to see someone go to the Kentucky Derby and wear a fastener. Let me tell you about Secretariat. So Secretariat is known as the best horse of all time, and the reason for this is because of his heart. His heart was 4 times the size of a regular horse heart, which for a human would kill us. You don't want an enlarged heart as a human, but as a racehorse, it basically made it so that when everyone else was slowing down, he had just done his warm-up. He's ready to speed up, and he ended up beating everyone by like multiple horse lengths. They measure horse races and horse lengths, so like how many horses you can put between. Yeah. Secretariat ended up completing the Triple Crown in record time, which is a group of 3 different horse races: the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes, and the Belmont Stakes. You know a little bit about the history of the Kentucky Derby. There's so much that you can do there that I obviously couldn't show you, whether it be riding a horse simulation and getting yourself into jockey position, trying on those fasteners, exploring the museum, walking around the track. It's definitely worth it if you're in the area. 10 out of 10 recommend. Now here's the part where we get a little bit iffy. I'm sure you have heard of ziplining in the sky. I myself have done it a few times. But have you heard of ziplining underground? Now you might think I'm insane right now. Mackenzie, what do you mean? If you're ziplining, you're in the air. Well, in Louisville, Kentucky, at Louisville Mega Cavern, which is this giant underground cave, you can go ziplining underground. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. When I planned this trip, I booked these ziplining tickets for my family with me and them not knowing what they were getting themselves into. I genuinely told my mom we were driving to Kentucky so I could go ziplining underground. And there was not a ton of information. And when I tell you this felt like the sketchiest experience of my life at first, we drove around this little shopping center and there was just a hole in the side of like this, there's this giant rock face and there's just holes in it. And then we walked down this sketchy hallway into basically this blacklight room that's covered in fake rock, and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So this is it. It was like maybe a 15-20 minute walk into the cave. And then the entire course is like lit up in lights. There's drops, like it is so deep. We're climbing up rock faces and I realize exactly what I just got myself into. Now the first zipline we went on was called the Zipline to Hell.
Why don't you come sit next to me? Let things happen naturally, like it used to be. I don't wanna go away.
So after I survived my journey to hell, we decided to put on a little bit of cave makeup. And what I mean by that is there's clay in the cave that when it gets wet, it turns into almost like a face paint. And they were like, go ahead, put it on your face. It's like a little face mask. So got some warrior paint on my face to get me excited and ready for the rest of the zipline course.
Waste another day, mess it up again, stand my way. I'll be the one to have the highest price to pay if I make it home.
There's a total of 6. The most noteworthy part to me was when we went into the all aerial section that you had to be strapped on just to walk along the side of these cliffs. And then they started playing Indiana Jones music as we crossed this like suspension bridge. Holy shit, like this is insane. But a few more zip lines later and we reached the end of the course. We all thankfully survived and it was time for the duo zip line. Now this is the final zip line and it's a racing zip line, which means that you can race against someone, and obviously I was gonna race against my brother and prove once and for all that I'm the best. So I did, and I beat him by a lot. He won't tell you I beat him by a lot, but I beat him by a lot. Now, ziplining isn't your thing, but you still want to explore Louisville Mega Caverns, or maybe you want to see people go ziplining. Maybe you just want to see the lights in the cave, because there were some really cool lights. Look at how awesome those disco lights were, right? Now, if you want to see all of that, they do have options for tram tours, walking tours, and if you're scared of just going in the cave at all, you can go in the fake cave and go do the high ropes course. So obviously that was the most kind of exciting, interesting, and unique thing we did in Kentucky, activity-wise. Doesn't mean it was the most interesting thing we saw in Kentucky though, and that takes us downtown Louisville, baby. Now downtown Louisville is known for a couple different art installations, art installments. One of those being decently normal, which is in front of the Louisville Slugger Museum. And it's just a giant Louisville Slugger bat that you can see from pretty much wherever you want to see it because it sticks way up above the building. Now, we didn't personally go inside the Louisville Slugger Museum because I didn't have a ton of interest in Louisville Sluggers and baseball, because a Louisville Slugger is like a baseball bat. And I know I'm such an advocate for when you are there, I don't care if it's your thing or not, go and see it and do it. But we had really limited time in Louisville, and honestly, if I had to choose between the Louisville Slugger Museum and underground ziplining, I would choose underground ziplining every time. But the Louisville Slugger is nothing compared to the Golden David statue. Now you may be asking me, Mackenzie, what do you mean Golden David? So, if you've read my blog a little bit, first off, unpackedwithmac.com, go read it. Kentucky will be up soon on the website. But if you read my blog, or maybe you follow me on Instagram, at mackenzie.grace.s. If you follow either of those, maybe you knew that I was in Italy last summer and saw David in Florence. I thought that was my last time seeing David and his little it's really small, okay? Anywho, it was not my last time seeing it, because lo and behold, a year later in Louisville, Kentucky, there is a foam version. Now it is spray painted foam, bright gold, 3 times the size of the original David statue, just in downtown Louisville. And there was this really funny group of people that were walking around and had no idea what to expect, and you could see the shock on their faces. They were thoroughly surprised to say the least. But the rest of Louisville, I think, speaks for itself. So here's a little montage of our night in downtown Louisville, which, by the way, Louisville, I have some beef with you. You are the sleepiest town I have ever seen in the history of the world. Like, how on earth is it a Friday night in Louisville and only like one restaurant was open, which ended up being really good. It was this burgers and mussels restaurant. Surf and turf, okay? But seriously, like, how is there no one on the streets?
One last time, let me hold you. One last time, what if it's too late for me now? What if you gone to someone else, so we can never be the same? How can I make up for my sins? Now I'm lonely and it kills me. Can you hear me, babe? I'm lonely. I know you don't wanna talk.
That concludes our time in Louisville, Kentucky, and a little bit of Frankfort, but we didn't spend a whole lot of time there. In case I inspired you to go to the 150th Kentucky Derby, please let me know. Send me a picture of you in a fastener, because you're going to get one if you go. I'm looking at you. Buy a fastener, please. Anywho, I headed up to Indiana for the next week. I did take some videos in Indiana, which you'll see soon, and I also went to Michigan, which I'm sure will also be around soon. That being said, go read the blog. I'm sure Kentucky will be up at some point within the next few weeks, and go check out Instagram if you want to see some of the behind the scenes content from this trip. Bye!